Hello, and welcome back to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm so excited to share today's episode with you. I had a chance to sit down with the lovely Stacey Sumereau, Catholic author, speaker, and host of the Called and Caffeinated podcast. Stacey recently published a book entitled Adventure Awaits: How to Interpret Your Desires and Hear God's Voice. On this episode, Stacey shares her incredible story of discerning God's will throughout her life, and everything from a Broadway touring career to discerning religious life on reality TV. It's a great story, and Stacey weaves in all of the ways that God used her desires and really revealed his heart to her. She also offers practical tips to help you discern God's will in your life as well. I really enjoyed today's conversation, and I'm so excited to finally share it with you. We're living a culture of life. Come and join us. Welcome to the podcast, Stacey.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
It's a pleasure to have you here and have it in person. I love doing in-person episodes, which is sometimes rare with guest episodes.
Yeah. This is a rare treat for me as well. And we were just admiring all of the books, all of the learning behind us. It's so fun.
I love the look of all the old books.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be talking about discernment today because you just wrote a book. Is it out yet, your book that you wrote?
It comes out in just a couple of weeks.
Okay.
They actually just changed the publication date, and I'm not sure what it is. It was originally April 4th, and then we bumped it up, I think, to late March. So It's called Adventure Awaits: How to Interpret Your Desires and Hear God's Voice, and it's with Ave Maria Press. So I'm so excited. I've interviewed authors myself on my own podcast for years, and so it's so cool to have the opportunity to actually put something out in the world, put my heart on paper and send it out. So it's such a blessing.
It is. And I got to read through quite a bit of it, and it was very good. And it was very helpful. I liked the practical journaling tips you had in there, like helping people kind of be able to take what they're reading about and apply it to their life. So
yes, I'm a person of action. That's one of my virtues. I have lots of struggles, but one of the things I am good at is taking action. So my job with the book is not done until my readers go out and actually implement the things. It is written to be an easy read, so you can take it to the beach with you. And instead of reading a romance novel, you could totally just read that. I don't know if people read romance novels at the beach anymore, but whatever you're planning on reading, whatever light reading you want at the beach, that would be appropriate. My book would be appropriate for that. But then also there's a lot of lessons kind of tied into the stories as well. So I tried to get a good balance of both so that it's, you're not kind of trying to plug through Aristotle or Aquinas. However, you are picking up a lot of really valuable lessons in the meantime.
Well, and that's like a great way to do a book is when it's easy to read, but there's so much there that you can keep returning to it and getting new things out of it as well.
Yes. And it was interesting even writing it because at different points, when you write your story and you're really looking for God's voice in it and you're really looking for God working in it, sometimes I felt like I was reliving those lessons that I had already learned, and I had to relearn them because now 10 years later, I'm learning those lessons in a brand new way as a mom, than I was in my single years.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Of just like self-reflection and looking back and being like, how does this apply here? Having to like remind yourself, like, I learned this. Now I have to like remember that I learned this once and relearn it again.
Yes, 100%.
So before we dive into your story, what is discernment? Because I feel like that is a thing that people hear is thrown around in the Catholic world. Discernment, I'm discerning this, I'm discerning that, I'm discerning religious life, I'm discerning what to do with my day. And I feel like just like kind of defining that right at the outset is a good idea.
Yeah. So if you look in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the word discernment is defined as to sift or to sort, which I think is really interesting. So I actually like that definition quite a bit. As far as like a formal discernment process, though, as Catholics, I feel like we're not really taught the beginning, middle, and end of a discernment process, and every discernment process looks so different. So I like to think of discernment as sorting through the layers of your desires in your heart and learning how to really partner with and surrender to God to find those deepest desires. So I use this really weird analogy of our hearts being like an onion in terms of like having layers. So just like in the movie Shrek, where he talks about, Shrek talks about ogres having layers. And, we have layers of desire in our heart as well. We have the layer of sort of basic necessities, water, food, shelter. Then underneath that is the layer of maybe comfort, right? And I always want fuzzy socks on my feet. My feet are always cold. I always want to have, a glass of wine in the evenings, just those things that are extra but comfortable. But if we have all of those needs and those comforts fulfilled, that's still not the deepest layer. Then we need our mission and our purpose underneath that. So sifting and sorting through all of those layers can really help reveal the motivations. It can help mature us. It can absolutely grow our relationship with the Lord. And that's why it's a little hard to define, like, what is the process of discernment? And as kind of a side note, something that I've noticed in interviewing so many people on my podcast who are way more intelligent than I am is that there is, as we sort through these layers and we try to get to the deeper ones, there's a real struggle there, right? Of what if God wants to take something from me that I really want? Yeah. And so what I've really tried to convey in my book is that when you discern and you figure out what are those deepest desires in your heart, the message that is so potent and so loud with every one of my guests is that God doesn't want to take away those deepest desires. His desires for you are actually the same as the deepest desires for yourself, which I think, I mean, if there's one message I could share with the world, it's that, because I think that eradicates all of the nerves, right, of the fear that I felt so much and still do sometimes. Like, Lord, do you really have my best interest at heart? If I give you my heart and I hold it out to you and I let you take it, are you going to say, okay, that's mine, thanks, now you have to be miserable? Because that's what I was convinced for years that the Lord wanted to do. I thought he wanted me to be a nun so that I would be just pure sacrifice all the time and no joy. Yeah. Whereas really the joy is meant to be hand in hand with the sacrifice. Your joy is so important to the Lord. And God doesn't want just your sacrifice constantly all of the time. There's going to be sacrifice built in, but he really does want those deepest desires that are that core of the onion, so to speak, to return to our weird analogy. And that's what I really discovered in my own life. So very lengthy answer to your question of what is discernment. We can look at St. Ignatius of Loyola. He's kind of the discernment guru of the church, if you will. And he came up with rules for discernment. And everybody, when I give talks about discernment, everybody wants to focus on the rules and they want to have a very specific process, right? They're like, tell me the rules so I can do it right.
Check this box, check this box, check this box. Okay, I did everything as I was supposed to, and I know my answer is the safe one.
Exactly. We want that safety, and I hate to break it to everybody, but the Lord doesn't just want your safety. That's why my book is titled Adventure Awaits. The Lord is an adventurer. He wants an adventure that's greater than we could ever dream. I believe, okay, I might get the verse wrong. 2 Corinthians 12:9. I'm not sure if that's the right one, but I do know what the verse is. It's eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor the heart of man conceived what God has ready for those who love him. And the loving God has to be the first and the most important thing, rather than the rules. The Lord cares more about how we are and who we are than what we do. Not to say the what isn't important, but when we get to heaven, it's all who, it's all relationship, right? The to-do list goes away, the what job am I going to have, who am I going to marry, what convent will I join, all of that to-do action items go away, which is something I need to hear constantly because I am a very goal-oriented, action-oriented person. Sounds like you are too.
It's the what you get done, and you're like, I have to actually work on myself too. And
yes. Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, I guess I should just sit and be for a while with the Lord instead of just asking the Lord, like, what do you want me to do, right? And so the Lord really cares about that relationship first and foremost. And those of us who need to hear that are, the people like you and me who are the action-oriented people. So even though we want to go to these rules of St. Ignatius, if you look at the work of St. Ignatius, the rules come at the very end. The whole first, 200 pages is St. Ignatius spiritual exercises. And what the exercises are entering into a relationship with the Lord. It's learning how to have a colloquy, which is a conversation with him. You place yourself at the foot of the crucified Jesus and you speak to him as a friend and you ask, what am I doing for Christ? What have I done for Christ? What should I do for Christ? Right? So he teaches you how to have a colloquy. He teaches you how to enter into all of the scenes in the Bible to place yourself in the life of Christ, right? And that whole relationship, that comes first. And then we can get to the rules for discernment, right? So I think we can look to St. Ignatius as a very important role model. And we all like to focus on those 14 rules. And there's certainly a lot to unpack there, but it's all based in a relationship with the Lord. And that's something I had to learn. Took me years and years and years and years to learn. So I hope I can save everybody some time.
Are you familiar with Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, the like Montessori approach to religion at all?
A lot of my friends, like most of my friends, have their kids in Montessori, and my mom had some of my younger siblings do it. So I've heard a little bits, but I actually don't have my kids in. They're going to a classical school right now, so they haven't had the opportunity yet. But
well, what you were saying made me think of the way that is structured. So like level 1, which is the 3 to 6 year old level of like the atrium or like the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. That is focused all on the relationship because that's like the point in development where children are still developing who they are. So everything is like meditations on the Annunciation or on the Bible stories. And they're learning about the gestures. And it's not until you move into level 2 when children like the 6 to 9 are more like world oriented and trying to figure out their relationship with other people that you start learning more about like what you should do versus what you shouldn't do.
Oh, and interesting.
So when I was going through the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd training like 6 years ago, I was like, oh, okay. I feel like I've always focused on the like, what's the checklist? What does the Baltimore Catechism say? What are the rules of the do's and don'ts? And just like the importance of having that foundation and that relationship with Christ first. And so I was just really impressed with like, oh, okay, these kids are getting like a head start on that.
That's so beautiful. It's funny you mentioned the St. Joseph's Baltimore Catechism because my mom homeschooled me and she had me memorize from the St. Joseph's Baltimore Catechism. And that's good. That is so good to have that, those answers memorized, right? It's like, it's so good. But really it also, as you get older and you start to supposedly live out these things that you can answer, these memorized answers, have to look at the fruits of your life. Do I really believe that first and foremost, I'm loved by God? And if you do, then the fruits of your actions will show that. But for me, I know I would have pointed to the St. Joseph's Baltimore Catechism and said, yes, that's what I believe. But for many years, really the fruit of how I was living was to be I had an eating disorder. I was valuing myself only as the sum of my accomplishments and my achievements and my grades and how well I did in theater. I was a theater professional, and so it's very self-critical all the time. It's a very competitive field, and that really was how I judged myself. I wasn't looking at myself as a child of God, really and truly. But even though I could tell you that answer very quickly and easily,
I also feel like overachievers, which sounds a little bit like you two, are sometimes fall into that trap of, what is the greatest sacrifice I can make for God too? And then I have to do that to prove that I love him.
Yes.
Which kind of goes back to the point you were making earlier with how people approach sometimes religious life of, okay, I don't want to be a nun. Therefore, I have to go be the nun because that is the biggest sacrifice I could make. And I have to prove that I'm like a loving like child of God, but that's not how you treat your parents. So
yeah. And I mean, there's a whole, we can jump into discerning kind of that if you want, because I very much relate to that, that God only wants my sacrifice. And it was interesting. I interviewed Father Timothy Gallagher last year, and he's written 30 plus books on St. Ignatius of Loyola. He's wonderful. And he said so gently, he's so gentle, and he just couldn't emphasize enough that really the Lord, if the Lord is giving you joy and the Lord is just giving you simple joys in life, like you should accept those from the Lord, just like you would accept a season of sacrifice. And that can be sometimes harder, like you said, for us overachievers. So let's dive into that a little bit, because unless you want to go back to kind of starting from the beginning,
I do want to hear about you being on Broadway because I think that's really cool. But
cool. Let's start there, and we'll make sure before we finish the conversation, this will be the teaser. Listen to the whole episode to find out how I discern my vocation. But so I'll let you jump back. I'll let you.
Well,
what do you want to hear?
I just want to hear about, first of all, I want to hear what it was like just being on Broadway, because that's really cool. And then like, how did you live your faith on Broadway? Like, I feel like that's a very hard atmosphere. I know people that have gone to go try to be on Broadway, gone to New York to become actors or actresses and end up losing their faith because it's a hard atmosphere to keep practicing, or
it can be.
kind of it goes in one box and then your life becomes dedicated to acting. So what was your experience there?
Yeah. So 12 years ago, I feel like it was easier probably to be in New York and receive, I think the world's gotten even more polarized, especially the culture in cities. And I hear some stories from my actor friends who are still there. And I'm like, whoa, I'm kind of glad I got out when I did, even though I loved my time there. And just to clarify, so I did Broadway national tours.
Okay.
So you can say Broadway, yes, but I was never performing in New York in a Broadway theater.
That was one question I did have.
Yeah. Because there's a very specific, a Broadway house in New York City is 500 or more seats. Okay. So I did like some, I guess they would be off Broadway or off Broadway in New York. And then I did Broadway national tours where those were usually 1,000 to 5,000 seats per night, but they were touring around the country. So I did The Wizard of Oz and I did Beauty and the Beast. I know it was such a blessing to be part of these like iconic shows. You're just, that you're living out this history. And we would even we played the Fox Theater in St. Louis, which was probably my favorite theater. It was unbelievably gorgeous. And when you went backstage, like there was Judy Garland's signature on the wall,
cool.
And it's like, she was Dorothy and we're back here, it was so, so cool. And Michael Jackson, like just, Tony Bennett, like all these legends had signed the wall of all these people who had played there. So
did you sign it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, okay. We did. We had a stencil actually for the tour and they would paint it like green and then we would sign around it. Oh, cool. So they actually kind of crafted that knowing that we would be going to these theaters. And there's so many beautiful houses in the United States, like old vaudeville houses that are just absolutely gorgeous. Opera houses. I mean, so beautiful. So I got to play a lot of those. We went to, if you count up both tours, 43 different states and nearly every province of Canada, including a lot of ice hockey arenas in Canada. So we'd be playing the Fox Theater one week, and then the next week we're in Saskatoon in an ice hockey arena, and they put down boards over the ice, and we have like our gold heels, and we're like stepping on the boards, trying to not step on the cracks so that we would slip. And the orchestra is like in a room like with the Zamboni behind them. And they got little space heaters trying to keep their hands warm because it's the middle of the Canadian winter and like the ice hockey arena does not have heating. So yeah, and we're, getting dressed in like the locker rooms with like Gatorade machines next to us. So it was a whole mix of all kinds of things. I would say overall, less glamorous than you would imagine. I was in the ensemble. So the leads, Dorothy and Belle, like they got a lot of press, where they would go do TV appearances. We didn't do that too much, to be honest. We spent a lot of time on the bus and then hotels and then the theater. And that was super fun in my first tour, which was The Wizard of Oz. And God was so good to me. He actually gave me a friend named Anna. We were both munchkins together. And she was just such a wonderful Catholic who read the Bible. I know, right? Like I grew up Catholic, never cracked open the Bible. Like it was sitting on my shelf my entire life. I was like, oh, I hear the Bible. I hear it at Mass, But did I memorize the Bible? Did I actually take God's words personally? Did I read it as a love letter to me? No. But Anna did. And at the time I was trying to come out of my eating disorder and it was a long, slow process full of lots of lies from the devil. And so I'd built this kind of prison that I had inhabited for myself if I have to be this certain weight. And then on tour, like I didn't have control over my diet and my exercise routine. I was 8 to 12 hours a day on the bus most days. So you just can't keep a 2-hour, 3-hour workout routine when you're doing that kind of a schedule. And so, we're traveling through the Midwest, everything's covered in sour cream and cheese, so you can't get your diet, whatever salad food that you're used to. So that became very distressing for me for a while. And Anna was a munchkin on tour with me. She was in the Lullaby League, and I was the Mayoress of Munchkinland. So, very normal friend story, right? Standard. This is how most friendships start, is Munchkinland. But she would actually, invited me to just read the Bible with her on tour. And the effect that had on my life, it planted these seeds that I cannot even overstate. the difference that it made in my life, because I started to be curious about scripture, be like, well, that kind of doesn't make sense. Why are they talking about ostriches in the book of Job? Why is this particular turn of phrase used? Why is this translation used? And then also starting to figure out that God's love letter to me, I can take it personally. I can actually read it as a love letter to that can help heal these wounds that I want to heal. This is the answer. This is the connection, the missing link. And so that really made an enormous difference in my life. We would go read the Bible after the show, because there always has to be a little wind down. You have all this energy. So we'd go to one of our hotel rooms, and we called it churching. And we would sit and read the Bible, and then, for half an hour, 45 minutes, and talk about it, and then go to sleep. And she just really gave me a new, like a whole new dimension to my faith. And so that was really beautiful. Then on my second tour, I was the only one who was going to Mass. There were some people who were cultural Catholics, but they were not interested in going to Mass with me. So I went by myself for 11 months. I was very lonely on that tour. I started to pick up habits I was not proud of. I started to really lose my love for theater, because it was kind of a toxic culture. There was I just didn't really feel safe with the friendships that were there. It was a lot of making up and breaking up of friendships. And I just got very tired of it, to be honest. 11 months is a very long time. And we didn't get breaks. We had 8 shows a week. Mm-hmm. We didn't really get to go home ever. I went home maybe twice for a day or two. So I really started to miss my friends of faith back in New York. And by the time that tour was done, I had really lost my passion for theater, mm-hmm. which was a shock. It was a total shock. Yeah. And, I was talked about earlier, the layers of the onion. It all relates now. Like, it all comes together. At the time, I was so disoriented. I call it the worm of discontent, just eating away at me. That whole tour telling me, like, this isn't who you want to be. Meanwhile, I'm saying to myself, I went to college for this. I have worked so hard for this since I was 15 years old. I'm living my dream. So many actors are jealous of me. Why is this not fulfilling to me? And if you think about those layers of the onion, right? I thought my mission and my purpose was to be an actress. I thought that was really going to fulfill me. But there was an even deeper layer. And I can look back and I can see that theater fulfilled a desire for community that I had, to be a part of something bigger than myself, right? But that wasn't fully expressed through theater. That's actually a desire to build up the kingdom of God. So now my life looks like, it's like a very normal looking life in many ways from the outside. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm pregnant with my 5th child. But the community that I have here in Winchester, the Front Royal, Winchester, Stephen City area, is fulfilling that desire for me of mission, being a part of a community, because it's centered around our church, because it's centered around our faith. And that I had no idea. I always thought, if I ever, have a lot of kids, and like, I'm going to be so bored as a mom. Like, that's such a normal thing to do. That's way too boring. I always wanted to be special and different, but I'm like, wait a minute, this adventure of the heart is so much more fulfilling and so much deeper.
Have you found that theater specifically has impacted your life as a mom? Like, do you put on plays with your kids or whatever too? Because I feel like sometimes God takes those desires and those passions you have as in the youth, and then helps you twist it in a new way for a family.
Yeah. Yes and no. So I'm a speaker, so that kind of scratches the itch of being on stage. But again, it's a much deeper fulfillment, because now I'm not doing a play where I'm playing a character and perhaps potentially doing, questionable moral things that are required for this role or whatever. I don't have to worry about that. It's like literally I'm leading people to the Lord. Like, there is nothing more fulfilling for me and nothing better for me. So being a speaker is like that. I love that so much. As far as with my kids, it's interesting. My 2 oldest are introverts. And so we sing a lot at home. And they love to dance with me and so forth. As far as performing goes, they haven't yet gotten into a show. But I think my 6-year-old, actually today's her 7th birthday. My 7-year-old, it's weird to say, my 7-year-old girl has a beautiful voice. I think she's going to be a performer. And I think the next 2 under her as well, numbers 3 and 4, will probably be a performer in some capacity.
At
But
home.
at home for starters. Yeah. There's still so little, I would love to like be a part of shows with them, act in shows with them or direct. So it was really cool. Actually, now I'm thinking a couple years ago, I'm not doing this right now because life has been crazy, but I was leading the creative movement class for their homeschool group. And it was so fun. My kids all the kids loved it. Like it wasn't a full-on dance class, but it was just creative movement. And the kids just got so into it. So I got to tap back into that side of things. Yeah. So there is a sacrifice there because I haven't been part of a show myself since I was, since before I was a mom.
Yeah.
Evening rehearsals, it's like, how do you do that with a nursing baby?
Yeah.
It's a little tricky. Some people can do it, but we've just had so many babies in a row that there's been that sacrifice. But that's okay. It's okay for a season. I'm a multi-passionate person. I have all of these different loves and desires and things. And I've just started to realize like, I can't do it all at once, but I can do it all. Yeah. And I do it all at different points. So today I'm putting on my podcasting speaking hat. And then, later I'm going to go make cupcakes for my kid's birthday, so it's.
Put on the baking hat.
Exactly. Put on my mom baking hat. Exactly. And the Lord calls me to everything, but I can't do everything all at the same time. So there is a temptation there to be like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I just have to remember like, God's given me too many desires. It's just like not physically possible to do them all
He
at
also
once.
gave you a body which limits you and only allows you to do certain things at certain times.
Exactly. But that, that's where surrender comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a huge theme of the book is allowing the Lord to direct your steps. Mm-hmm. Again, don't remember the verse, but it's in Proverbs. I think is it Proverbs 16:9. The human heart plans the way, but the Lord directs the steps. Yeah. And so letting the Lord direct your steps is so key.
Now I'm trying to remember from your book, you're like leaning into surrender and praying the surrender prayer. Did that come right after Broadway or at the end of Broadway?
Yeah, basically. Okay. So I lost my desire to audition. Mm-hmm. I started skipping auditions. Everyone's going, what's your next show? And I'm like, I don't know. I have nothing to say. And it was very embarrassing, very hard for me. And I just started going to daily mass because that was the only place that I found a lot of peace. I was like, I don't know where this is leading. And then a whole series of things started to happen. I was just working as a waitress and, God started leading me through beauty and through desire, which I think was really what it kind of invited me away from theater in a very final sort of sense. My mom gave me a book called The Ear of the Heart by Mother Dolores Hart. Have you ever heard of her before?
I have. And I was actually really excited to see you mention her in your book because I thought her story was so cool of just, well, you can beautiful. Tell our audience, but basically just like leaving Hollywood and becoming a nun. Yes,
she left Hollywood. She was way bigger of an actress than I ever was. She was like Elvis's first on-screen kiss. She was the girl of the 50s, on screen. And she got a Tony nomination. Like she was, a big time star. And at age 24, when she was engaged, she broke up with her fiance, went to Bethlehem, Connecticut, and joined the Cloistered Dominicans there. So as I was reading her story, there was so much in her story that just resonated with me. I felt like we were sisters in a sense, spiritual sisters, and a lot of fear too, because I was like, well, if God called her to be a nun, maybe he's calling me as well. And I actually drove to Connecticut. I don't know what I was thinking. Like I didn't have an appointment. What was I thinking? Like the sisters like sit around and like wait for random single women discerning
music. You go and you ring the bell. And you're able to come in.
You just come in. Yeah, exactly. And they'll see you right there, right? Well, so I show up and I asked to see Mother Dolores. And the portress, which is the title of the sister who's assigned to answer the door, she just like shook her head at me and she goes, "You don't understand how the monastery works at all." And I was like, I'm sorry. But she said, wait here. And so I waited about 15 minutes and Mother Dolores actually did come and see me, which was so special. It was so special. And actually, this is a story I've never told before because it's a little involved. I tell it in my book.
Yeah.
So I was so excited to share this though, because it's so oddly specific. Mm-hmm. And like, this is, if there's anything I hope to convey, it's not only does the Lord want like the deepest desires in your heart for you, but even like the weird ones, like the really, really the ones where you're like, how could this possibly fit into God's plan? Sometimes we can think like God's plan must be like, I just have to be praying all the time and I'm just a monk or a nun or like, I don't know, a mom of 12 kids. Like those are the only plans that God has for me. And really the Lord is so specific in his design and his plan for you. And this is one of the ways that he can really leave love notes for you is when you get really specific with your desires, the Lord can answer those desires. And when you pray for them very specifically, the Lord can answer them very specifically. So at the time when I went up to Connecticut, my big objection to discerning religious life was I said to the Lord, look, I can't be a nun because I am an artist at heart. I need to sing, I need to dance, I need to act, right? Like this is my mission from God, right? Like this is what I was born to do. So you made me this way. So, like I need to be able to do these things and I can't do that in a convent. Also at the time, I had this very weird, specific hobby / side job of making dolls. And they were about 18 inches high. People jokingly call them voodoo dolls. I didn't even know what a voodoo doll was. I was like, what is that? But I started making them of my castmates when I was on tour.
Okay.
So I was sculpting them out of just like clay that you can get from the craft store. Mm-hmm. And I would sculpt the faces, they're about this big, to look like the face of the person who was playing the role. And then I'd go and get fabric from the costume designer and I'd build out this whole doll of them as their character. So it was like a memento for the show, right? Which is like a wonderful
That's so cool.
little thing to have. Yeah. So I made a bunch of those. And that was probably like one of the most fun things of being on tour for me was sculpting on the bus, passing hours very happily. It was kind of like, therapeutic. So I was making these dolls and the whole cast would get excited. Like they all wanted to see like the doll reveal, once the doll was done. So and then that kind of continued after tour. Like they told their friends and other people wanted dolls of themselves. And so, or of friends or whatever. So I was doing a bunch of those. And meanwhile, I'm telling the Lord, I can't be a nun. I'm too artistic. I have to sculpt, dance, sing, act, all this. And so I go to Connecticut and I go see Mother Dolores, and then I'm just reflecting on everything that she said. And she was so calm and encouraging. I just felt like my soul was like, okay, I can relax now. Now I can just think about things without all this like emotion like pent up inside me. So I'm walking around the grounds and the grounds are beautiful. And I go into the chapel and the sisters are singing in Gregorian chant. They're singing the Liturgy of the Hours. They sound like angels. And I was like, well, okay, they get to sing, but like it's only chant. Like it's not show tunes. Okay. And then I remembered that I went to see the theater that they have on their campus. They actually have a summer theater.
Cool.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And Mother Dolores invited me to audition for Annie, which ended up not working out because I had other plans. I ended up actually discerning my at different convents that summer. But the fact that you could still be, I don't know if the sisters appear in shows or if they're more just doing the behind the scenes, but like they have a theater on their property. It's like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. And then I'm going around the property and I see that there's a nun who makes cheese and she wrote a book about it. There's all these like and they've designed all these cards in the gift shop. So there's like they're very artistic. And then the lady in the gift shop was like, oh, you have to go see the creche in the woods. And I was like, okay. Like it's like February, like it's not Christmas time. Why do I want to see this creche? So, but I go and I follow the signs and it's about a half-mile walk and I go through the woods and then I step into this little building and it's very dark and it took me a minute for my eyes to adjust to the light. And when you go see like at a museum, they keep the lights dark so that it doesn't damage whatever historical artifacts are there, right? So my eyes had to adjust. I had no idea what I was in for. And then once my eyes adjusted, I had to sit down immediately and I just gasped because spread out before me, there were about 100 figurines that looked just like the dolls that I made. I'm not even kidding you. It was crazy. And it was a creche scene, but in Italy, they call them I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I'm not sure, a presepe.
Okay.
Or presepe is maybe how they say it. But in Italy, they don't just do the Christ child and Mary and Joseph and like one shepherd and one angel and the three kings. They do like 100 figurines. They do the whole village. Yeah. And so you've got, your gardeners and you've got little chickens running around and you've got merchants and you've got people selling bread. You've got an entire village and some of them are looking at Jesus. Some of them are looking away. Some of them aren't even paying attention. And you just have this whole scene spread out, and they're like 18 inches tall. And this set was from, I believe, the 1600s. I think it was made in Italy. And it's like the nuns restored this set. So they like re-sculpted and like redid the clothes. And I had to sit down and I was like, okay, Lord, well, you showed me, didn't you? That's not to say that like I would necessarily be sculpting as a sister, but just knowing that that is a thing that some nuns did was like, okay, the Lord answered that objection in a particularly specific, particularly fantastic way. And from that point on, I decided, I was like, okay, I'm gonna really think about this. I'm gonna actually start going to visit convents. And that was kind of the beginning of my official sort of discernment process, which I had no idea what I was doing.
Okay, so for people that like might be listening or whatever, like who have this idea that God speaks like very much through signs, did you feel like that was a sign like, oh, now I have to go become a nun?
Yeah. So I guess you could call it a sign. It's interesting. I actually have a chapter in my book about signs. And I don't love asking the Lord for a sign. I would say that the doll incident scenario story wasn't exactly a sign, simply because I would say it was an answer to a prayer. I'd say it was like a love note from the Lord, because he was just showing me like, I'm going to take care of your heart. Like your desires matter to me. Your joy matters to me, not just your sacrifice. Like I can take care of you. And so the reason I would call that a love note rather than a sign is because I see the word sign maybe it's a little bit of a fuzzy word, right? Yeah. And sometimes, often actually, people will say, I've asked the Lord for a sign. And I say, well, what does that mean? Because if the Lord gave you a sign, would you know what it is? Yeah. So I actually don't love recommending that people ask the Lord for signs. I'll give you an example. If my husband comes to me and he's like, hey, do you think our 7-year-old should play soccer this spring? And if I were to say to him like, okay, I have thoughts on that, I'm going to send you a sign. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And I'm not going to tell you when I'm going to send it. So you just have to be on the lookout. Good luck. And then the next day, let's say, that would be super weird, first of all. A very weird way to communicate in a relationship, right? Second of all, let's imagine my husband comes home from work the next day and there's a soccer ball sitting in the middle of our driveway. And then he's wondering, he's like, did Stacey put the soccer ball there? Did our kids just happen to kick it there and it's just sitting in the middle of the driveway? Like, is this the sign? So a lot of times it's a weird illustration, but like a lot of times we don't know what we're asking for when we ask for a sign,
it's
right?
It's a weird illustration, but I feel like it's a helpful one of looking at like what that actually looks like in the context of a real relationship. Yeah. It's kind of a setup for bad communication, I feel, a lot of times. Not to say that the Lord doesn't use signs. He absolutely does. And you could totally say that the doll story was a sign in a way. But again, I think there's a lot of miscommunication that kind of comes with the word signs. Kind of why I wanted to bring it up, because I feel like a lot of people who want like the plan and the actual answer would look at something like that and be like, well, I guess this is what I have to do. So,
and that can so easily become a source of temptation from the evil one. You know, the devil really, really wants to drive a wedge in your trust with God. And he will jump in at any opportunity, at any weak point that you have. Anytime you start looking for the littlest shred of evidence that God isn't that good, or that God only wants your, the hard and the sacrifice and doesn't want your joy, the devil's just going to jump right in there and just try to widen that gap as much as possible. And I see that happening with signs, because then people who do ask for a sign end up feeling a little betrayed by God and a little bit pulled around, like you're, and I felt this at different points too. Like I've totally fallen for this before. And then you feel like God's doing like a bait and switch on you. And you're like, but I got this flyer in the mail that tells me they're advertising a soccer league. Like that was my sign, like what? You just look for them everywhere, and that it can get very confusing, and it really doesn't increase your trust with the Lord.
It does seem like it's going back to that, like, wanting an answer, wanting a plan, wanting the safe option.
Yes.
Because you want like the guarantee that what you're thinking about is going to work out.
Yes, 100%. We want the itinerary, right? We want God to the hand to come down from heaven with the plan written on it. You can marry your boyfriend now or whatever. We want that assurance in that voice. And God absolutely does that sometimes. But what I've found is that when he speaks to me, it's about his relationship with me. So kind of like I mentioned earlier, surrender is just like, that was the first step of saying, Lord, I need to surrender to your plan. And I prayed this prayer of surrender every day, and it was very hard. But eventually, actually, God granted me a vision that really changed my life, where he gave me his heart. And that was a huge gift. That was the first time I had seen Jesus. He'd spoken to me. We can go into what that sounded like and felt like if you want to.
I feel like our audience is like, wait, tell me about this.
Yes, this is something I'm very passionate about because I've never heard anybody like a modern, I don't know, somebody now talking about like a vision that they've received from the Lord. When I say never, that's probably not true. I just don't think it's talked about very much. But I had the opportunity to have Dan Burke to do an interview with him. He was the former head of EWTN.
Okay, yeah.
And I asked him just sort of anecdotally, like, how many Catholics do you think experience God in prayer as a voice or a vision? And he teaches a class on prayer. And so this is obviously like a niche audience. These are people who are coming to him for continuing education on this particular topic. So this might be a higher than average kind of, metric here. But he said in his class, it's usually about 50%.
Yeah.
Which to me was shocking because like, I was like, that many people actually like experience and hear God as like a vision or a voice. Because for many, many years, it felt like this very like, okay, if God gives me a vision, it's because I'll already be St. Teresa of Avila. I'll already be St. Faustina, but really the Lord came and spoke to me in my selfishness and in my sin in that moment when I needed him. Not because my faith was strong, but because it was weak, because it needed strengthening. And, and that was such a gift. So the way I experienced it, let's see if I can describe it. If you can sort of close your eyes and imagine a rose in front of you. Like you can, quote unquote, see it, right? In your imagination. It's kind of there in front of you, right? And there might be a background, there might not, but you can see a rose in your mind's eye. So that is how I experienced seeing the Lord, was kind of in that place of imagination. And I love tapping into imaginative prayer because, and I didn't even realize when the Lord gave this to me, I didn't quite really know what I was doing. It was just a surprise. But now I kind of intentionally go to that place. St. Joan of Arc was on trial for heresy. And one of the prosecutors was asking her about her visions from the Lord, and she was answering, and he said, well, it sounds like it was just in your imagination. And St. Joan said, well, of course it was. How else would God speak to me? I just think that's such a brilliant answer. So our imaginations are really a powerful tool. So if you imagine that rose in front of you, that's how the Lord kind of appeared to me, was in that place with my eyes closed. It was like both more and less spectacular and unusual than you would expect. Like it wasn't like I was seeing him in the corner over here. The difference between me imagining a rose and me seeing the Lord speaking to me was that if I were to say, okay, imagine a rose, now imagine a purple elephant. Like you can kind of jump from one to the other in an instant. With the Lord, like I couldn't like jump away like that. Like he was still there. I could have definitely, if I had opened my eyes and chosen to walk away, I could have, but like I couldn't just imagine something else really quickly. It was coming to me, the vision was coming to me from something that wasn't a place that wasn't me. And then similarly with hearing the Lord's voice, because he's spoken to me, I'd say at this point, he's probably spoken to me as a voice more often than as a vision. So sometimes when I'm praying, I just hear his words. And the way that I hear them is not dissimilar to the way I see him, which is if you can imagine your mother's voice, you can hear in your imagination the timbre, the tone of her voice, how she might say a particular thing, maybe one of the things that she said to you many times. Well, the Lord speaks in that place too. So when I say I hear him in my heart, I'm really hearing him kind of in my mind. But one of the ways that I know it's the Lord, and St. Teresa of Avila actually writes about this in Interior Castle, so it was really cool to read it and be like, oh, there it is, okay. one of the ways that we can be assured that it is the Lord is that it's not something that we would have thought of ourselves. So that's how I know it's a conversation with God, as opposed to me just making up something that I want to hear or making up something that I want to see. And she says, like, if your imagination is inventing it bit by bit, then that's not from God. If it is something that is surprising to you, so it's something that's revelatory that you know didn't come from you, that's one of the indications that that comes from the Lord. And when I hear God's voice or see him, it's always something that reveals his relationship with me. And it's so beautiful. And it's always so good, because just my lifelong wound is like always coming to the Lord is like, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. I'm too much. It's like both of those things at the same time. And the Lord, and so I approach from this place of need, of vulnerability, of desire, of wanting something. And then his answer comes and it brings so much peace to me. And I was discerning my vocation, and I would just ask him over and over again, Lord, what is it that you want me to do? Mm-hmm. Just tell me, please tell me. Like, once I'd surrendered and I had received this beautiful vision where he gave me his heart, and he asked me to put his heart where my heart used to be and take out my heart and give him my heart. So we had this vision of exchanging hearts. And at that point I was like, oh, yeah, like my love for him grew so much. And I just understood, when we surrender, we're gaining so much more than we have to lose. Like the little paltry, stupid, selfish heart that I had was so much less compared to, the most omniscient, omnipotent, beautiful, perfect heart in the universe. And that's really what happens when we surrender, is we surrender something that really belongs to the Lord anyway, and we gain him. We gain everything. And so as I continued discerning, I would ask him, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And his answer was always, do you know how much I love you? And after a while, I'd be like, okay, thank you. But what do you want me to do? Like a little spoiled 2-year-old. And after a while, I realized that was the answer. That he wanted me to have what was deepest in my heart, what I most wanted, which was marriage and motherhood. And so after a while, he never gave me the answer as to like, I want you to get married to this specific person. Mm-hmm. But I could trust that because I was walking with him, I was surrendering to him, and I was doing my very best to want what he wanted, that I could just choose the thing that I wanted. And that was okay with him,
I think that's something that's like a lesson to learn that a lot of people have to go through, especially if you're like a cradle Catholic. And it's like, you kind of have this idea of, especially like reading saint stories of like they're called to do these great things. And sometimes I think like a desire to be a wife or a mother or even to be a nun can seem like small or insignificant, or like we're called these other saints to these great things. Like called Saint Joan to like be this leader. And just being like, okay, no, like what I desire, like God's will isn't like against my desires. It's like channeling my desires.
100%. And even now in today's day and age, if you are entering into a Catholic marriage and you are open to life,
that's an
you
adventure.
are a warrior, right? Like you're a rebel in this current culture where a lot of people are saying, oh, well, it's not you're not being friendly to the environment to have more than 2 children or whatever. You face criticism and you're facing a culture. I certainly experience this. You're facing a culture that's not built for large families anymore.
No.
And so, you are doing something great for the kingdom if you want those, so-called ordinary things of marriage and motherhood. I think the devil is continuing to put more and more obstacles in the way of forming good, solid, healthy Catholic marriages.
Definitely. We see that here. That's like literally what we deal with every day.
Literally your work. Yes. And we feel it too, and it's such a blessing to have the community that we have in our area. It's a beautiful thing to have the support of other people who are walking the same road. But I know in certain areas of the world, like you feel very alone. Maybe you're the only one in your community that is using natural family planning. And when you do use NFP, you need support. Like you need anyway, that's a whole other thing. My point though is it's very brave to have a family, the way that God directs, the way that to be open to life, God really rewards those people, but it's also you're a modern day Saint Joan of Arc, really,
I had Maria Jones on the podcast like 2 years ago, and she and her husband have a family in the UK. Okay. And they have this beautiful podcast where they go around and they interview all these families throughout like the UK and Ireland about like living like being Catholics and being especially these bigger families in an area that it does not have the support. And that was one thing she was saying was just like I envy the communities that I see in America because we don't have that community support here.
Oh,
We can't survive on one income, and just like but she was also just like giving so much encouragement to moms
yes.
of like, no, you can take that step. Like a child
Yeah.
when he's born needs like a drawer to sleep in. Like you don't need this big fancy crib. Like
My youngest sleeps in the closet. It's a big closet. It's a nice closet, but it's a closet. Yeah. He's got his little pack and play. And you know what? He's very happy. He doesn't need his own room. He's so happy sleeping like next to mommy and daddy, essentially. Yeah. Yes, truly. Yeah. And isn't it funny too? Ireland, used to be such a Catholic country, and now it's amazing how the world has changed. But that's
Father
so
Bouquet just got back from a mission to Ireland, and he was just talking about like what it's like over there and the struggles they're facing, and just like how much they need a spiritual revival, just like the rest of the world, obviously.
Yes. And I know a few Irish Catholics, and they are wonderful. Like they are really intentional and really, really, and English Catholics as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
They have had to be for a long time in England.
They have a little bit more experience.
They got hundreds of years under their belt at this point.
Irish are like, we don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of like in the same boat as us, where it's like post-Christian world, and you're like, wait a minute. Things got to change. We got to get really intentional.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's a good wake-up call because it makes you like, you can get complacent, especially if you live in an area that has a great Catholic culture. It can become a little bit of the checking of the box.
Totally.
And I think sometimes you need a little bit of that struggle to
Yes, and that's the world I come from, because I was blessed to be raised in a Catholic culture, homeschooled, one of 8 kids, very much a Catholic, solid Catholic family. Yeah. But that conversion of the heart and the knowledge that, like we talked about at the very beginning with Montessori, the knowledge that you are just so loved. Yeah. That's why you're here. That needs to translate from here to here, right? Exactly. And that's the work that I'm hoping to do with my ministry and with my book, for people at all stages, regardless of what community support you have or had in your past. Do you mind if I put you on the spot real quick and actually ask? Because when I share about seeing and hearing the Lord, there are, it's so interesting. There's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of people who haven't experienced that. And the Lord really, like every single time it happens for me, it's a gift. I never count on it. It's a gift that I am meant to respond to. It doesn't mean that I'm holy, like Saint Teresa of Avila even says, if the Lord gives you visions, it may not be because your faith is strong. It might be because your faith is actually in need of strengthening, which is definitely the case for me. So it doesn't make me, there's no halo right now, right? But do you mind if I ask, like, has the Lord ever spoken to you that way? Because I love.
So.
Okay,
definitely not in a vision. Okay. What you were saying about it being something that doesn't come from your imagination is kind of like the pause I'll put on that is like, the times that I'm thinking of specifically, it was a phrase that I already knew, but it like came to mind with like a heaviness and a weight and like a voice behind it.
Yes.
In a way that was just like, and it's something that like, it stands out. It's not like every other time that you remember some phrase that you've heard that like, so like one time it was like, trust my plan or like, trust my will kind of thing.
Yes.
And the other time, this was right around the time I started dating my fiance. I was like, I'm a very anxious person. I like to know the plan. I want to know what's going on. And
Amen, sister.
I did not like the fact that I didn't feel like I knew what was going on. It was just like messy. Like it was just like, this is a really messy area and I don't know if I want to go. And I was like in the chapel downstairs just being like, God, what do you want me to do? Like, should I just break up and go? Like, and I just had that phrase from Narnia and the last battle where Aslan is like further up and further in.
Wow.
And then like, don't know why that came to me, but it did. It was just like, no, you just keep pushing through and like, trusting the plan and don't get like freaked out by messiness. And so those are the two that come to mind.
I love that. That's so cool. Isn't that funny? Like the Lord used Narnia, right?
Yeah.
Like, which I'm sure you love, right? We were talking before we started recording about how much you love children's literature. And it's like, of course the Lord would use that as like his words to you, you know? Of course that's so deep in your heart. Like I love the Narnia stories as well. And it's like, you see the beauty of what happens when they do step out in trust and when they follow Aslan, who of course is a symbol for Christ, right? And so it's like, of course the Lord would use that as his love letter to your heart.
So I just like loved that, like just like that realization of like, okay, just keep following God and it's going to be leading you always up into something greater. Yeah. But you kind of have to go through the onion because that's the other example that they use and that's like literally how he's described in the last battle of like heaven was like the onion with all these like layers.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, now I have to go back and read that. Whoa, I should have included that in the book. Okay. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. That's so cool. I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot. I've been conducting this sort of unofficial, just like poll of people, of Catholics that I know are practicing Catholics. I see them in the pews every Sunday. I know they're lifelong Catholics like me. And I'll ask them, like, have you heard the Lord's voice? And a lot of people, it's like a brand new thought to them. Like,
really?
I never thought about that before.
Interesting.
I think we're not encouraged in general enough to actually listen for the Lord's voice. And there's almost like a suspicion, like, well, God wouldn't want to speak to me.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I'm not seeking something sensational from my faith, which is good. I mean, that's a good desire to want to live just according to the truth. But then also kind of like we said, going back to that joy, it's like, well, how do you communicate with the Lord? Like, what do you, and this is also so important for discernment, because if we don't know the Lord's voice outside the context of trying to get an answer from him, then how will you know his voice when you are seeking an answer from him? You know? So that's why, regardless of what your state in life is now, if you start seeking his voice and ask him for things and let him answer those prayers for you, start living with more vulnerability to him, then you're going to have that trust built up. So then when it comes time to discern something, you have that foundation. And I found discernment has gotten easier for me as I have just learned to trust him in my daily life and like actually let him take care of my needs instead of me controlling everything and me arranging everything, which let's be honest, I can't do anyway. But if I try to craft a life that's so safe and secure, that doesn't leave any room for the Lord to work. And so learning to pray for all those little things, even just like, Lord, I'm lonely today. Like, could you send me a reminder of your love? Which the loneliness doesn't end when you get married. Side note, right? Even you're in a relationship, you know, you're getting married. It's like your spouse or your fiance is a wonderful person. My husband is like the holiest, most wonderful man ever. But there's still corners of my heart that no person could ever fulfill. Not because my husband isn't good enough, but just because they were made for God. And so you still have to like let the Lord fill those corners of your heart, you know? That never ends. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. But thank you for sharing. I think it's really important. One thing I'm thinking of is, if you don't mind, I'd love to send you a link to an episode I did on my YouTube channel about how to discern whether something is from God or from the devil.
Yes.
And using St. Teresa of Avila's rules. Okay. And my spiritual director said, you know, it's really important when you talk about this stuff to make sure that you give these sort of parameters, you know, because we don't necessarily want people going rogue. Like sometimes, like actually St. Teresa is very specific where she says, if the Lord tells you to do something, she said, don't do it until you bring it to your spiritual director. Submit to their authority. Because she said, you know, as Father Chad Ripperger says, he's like, you heard God speaking? Are you sure it's God? Because he's not the only one that broadcasts on that channel. So let's say God reveals like, you know, like he said to me, do you know how much I love you? That's not something that I have to discern with my spiritual director, because it's totally in line with what I know about God to be true of scripture, tradition, you know, and the tenets of our faith. But something like if God goes, you know, I want you to go out and do this thing, discern that with your spiritual director before you take action, because it could be that God is speaking to you, but it could also be that, you know, the devil is suggesting something to you. And, you know, spiritual warfare is real. And as we see St. Michael right over there, you know, and the devil would love to tempt you under the guise of doing something good into doing something that the Lord actually does not intend.
I can definitely put that in the description as well for people to check out. So
great. Thank you.
I don't want to like totally like get sidetracked on stuff. So can you just finish your story briefly for our audience? Because I know you.
What was this? Wait,
we
what was the
got
story?
up
I was
to
supposed
Sister Dolores. So you discerned becoming a nun and then got married. So just the Cliff Notes version, because obviously people want to read the book, but I don't want to leave them hanging of like what happened after you visited Sister Dolores.
Well, it doesn't get any less crazy than that after that. So at the same time as I was trying to decide whether or not to discern religious life, I had the craziest thing happen where it's too long a story, but suffice it to say, or it's too long a story to share fully here, but suffice it to say that I was invited to be a part of a reality television show about discerning religious life, which, you know, you talked offline before we started recording about how now that you're podcasting, it oddly fits you. Like,
yes.
you were like, I didn't know I was actually going to learn so much and enjoy it so much and how much it would fit me. Well, same thing with reality television. Like, I would never have chosen to be on reality TV, but I was the right person at the right moment for that particular challenge. Like, and there was something in it that I just couldn't say no to. There was a fascination. Like, I didn't watch reality TV. It was on Lifetime. Didn't watch Lifetime. I didn't even own a television. But there was something in it that I couldn't say no to, because when I talked to Mother Dolores about it, and I was on the point of like turning them down. My friends, my family, they were like, don't go on reality TV. They're going to make you look like an idiot. And as I prayed about it, what kept coming back was like, this would be an adventure.
Yeah.
There was something in that. And I brought it up to Mother Dolores, and she actually kind of got a little smile on her face. And she's like, why not? And I was like, okay, there's something in me that's like the why not, that I couldn't turn down. And then I also had the thought in prayer at one point, like, well, if I don't do it, then somebody else is going to do it. They're going to find somebody. And why not me? Because I really am entering into this discernment process of really considering truly giving my life to God as a nun. And if not me, then maybe they're going to pick somebody else who just wants to be on camera. And, at this point, I had never auditioned for television before. This was not my goal. It was like a friend sent me, like referred me, and I just wrote them an email, and then they like did like a Zoom call with me. Like, it was not like an audition process where I was like bringing my headshot waiting in line like I had done for years for Broadway. It was the most, like, I never left my house. Like, it was not like a typical audition process at all. And then they invited me to be on the show. And so while I was kind of, while I brought it up to Mother Dolores, she kind of was like, why not? And I realized, I was like, okay, I'm going to just continue to take that to prayer. So after seeing Mother Dolores, the show started filming. When was it? It was about 6 months later, the show started filming. Before the show started filming, I went ahead and visited the Little Sisters of the Poor in New York, because I wanted to make sure I got an off-camera discernment experience, because I didn't know. They intentionally kept me in the dark about certain things with the reality show, because they wanted, they wanted the first time to really be the first time. So we didn't know what orders we were visiting, and it was an adventure, but there was fear there too. So I went to Little Sisters of the Poor, and I said to myself, okay, if I get a no from God, like if this is like, nope, you're not meant to do this, then I'll just say no to the show. But I went to the Little Sisters of the Poor, and I loved it. And I hated that I loved it, but I couldn't help like falling in love with the residents that they serve. And there was, again, something there that was an adventure. It was so different than what I had been used to, but there was something there. There was a piece there that made me realize, okay, well, now I need to discern further, and I need to discern on reality TV, which, is not a normal path, but again, this oddly specific way that the Lord kind of takes care of your heart. And it's interesting too, because I think, given my personality, I'm totally the type of person who would have left halfway through the discernment visit because I was too scared. But because I'd signed a contract that I was going to stay for 6 weeks, that meant that I had to stay. And so isn't that funny that the Lord works through a television contract in my case, to get me to actually sit long enough to surrender and keep praying this prayer of surrender over and over every day, and actually do a holy hour with the sisters off camera every day where he was doing the work in my heart. There were so many good things that came out of that show, which you won't really see so much on camera because they wanted the more sensational things. And, unfortunately, I didn't levitate, or there was no miraculous, I don't know, whatever in the room while they were filming. But the Lord really was doing a lot of work in my heart. And so it was during that filming process, but off camera, when he gave me that vision of giving me his heart. And then I told him about it later on camera, but it just didn't have quite the same power or effect. It didn't make it into the final cut of the show.
They also probably weren't a Catholic show, so they weren't like looking for like the spiritual conversions. It was more of like what more dramatic things happen.
They kind of wanted, a little bit more of like the low hanging fruit of like the habits, like the externals of being a sister. And they were genuinely seeking the internal journey as well, but only as it could be kind of easily grasped by maybe a secular audience.
Yeah.
So I think, the vision was a little bit too, like, just a little too out there. It was just me talking about what happened and crying. I was crying the whole 6 weeks. I was crying, crying.
What have the reactions been like as a Catholic speaker to people having that? Because that's the more Catholic audience that's hearing it. What do they?
I mean, it's always good. Every discernment talk, I share that vision because that was the pivotal moment for me where my entire world shifted. And ever since then, I've understood, yes, the Lord wants to give me more than I have to surrender. And so I think people are very encouraged by that. It's such a simple image, like so simple, so understandable. I can tell it to my kids and they get it. They get it probably more deeply even than I do. But, it doesn't matter if you're 8 or if you're 85, like you can understand that image. And we all know how pivotal the heart is. The Sacred Heart is such a central image for our faith. And the heart is, the source of all emotion. It's the source of all love. It's the source of really us, of our spirit. And so that's how the Lord always works for me, is with my heart. And that's one of my favorite ways to pray, actually, is to just imagine my heart today. And like, what does my heart look like? Is it fine from one side, but then you kind of turn it and it's like, oh, there's a wound over here and that really hurts? Or is it, do I feel like it's pierced with a sword? Like, like the Blessed Mother's heart, like how is my heart doing? And then I can imagine that, just like we were talking about the imaginative prayer, close my eyes and imagine that, and then give my heart to the Lord and see what he does with it. And that's just a powerful thing I return to over and over again, because it starts with really the real me. How am I actually doing today? And that's what the Lord wants. What's bothering me? What's on my mind? What do I love? What am I finding delight in? And that's what the Lord wants, is the real you. And then when you give him your heart, he can always surprise you with what he's going to do with it. It's always amazing to me. It's always surprising. And then that strengthens that relationship. Yeah. So people are always encouraged by that. I think it's such an easy image to latch on to. And it's not something that, it's so in keeping with our faith.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up like the real you, because I think that is like something that's like really important. And people, sometimes it's easy to kind of forget because you get focused on the externals of like, there has to be an element of like self-knowledge within your relationship with God, because like you have to know yourself and your wounds, because that's going to affect how you relate to him, how you relate to other people.
Yes.
And if you don't like how can you be a gift of self if you don't understand yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and that's, like you said, that's the journey for me, is like, there's not church Stacey over here and then the rest of the week Stacey. They should be one and the same. Like whatever's happening outside of church, bring it to the Lord in church. Like I didn't understand how to connect, the messy emotions, like you said, even just like the stuff I'm ashamed of, the stuff that like the desires that I judge as being too shallow for the Lord to care about. Like I've always had this desire to just be popular. There was always some girl in high school that I was like, I wish I could just be like her. And I never asked the Lord, like, what is it about that girl that it is that I want? Like, why do I want to be her? And like, can you show me who I am to you, Lord? And like, can you show me, maybe that's a shallow desire, but there's something deeper there. There's a reason why I focus on that girl and I want to be like her. And, and I wish I brought that to the Lord so much sooner in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if we did and stopped judging our desires as being too this, too that, too shallow, not good enough, and only brought the Lord like, yes, I would like, I don't know, whatever desires we think are holiest, but actually just be authentic with him. He can work with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. He can work with whatever you're giving him.
Well, he gave you desires. So they're like, they're good and they do come from the Lord. And are they going to be fulfilled in the way you think they will? Maybe not. But that doesn't mean that those desires are like insignificant.
No, not at all. So. Like underneath that desire for popularity, again, going to the onion, the desire to be like lovable.
Yeah.
Lovable without having to do anything about it. Right? Yeah. Which you and I are people of action. So like I always get out there and I'm like, okay, here's my skills. Here's what I can do. Here's what I can produce. Here's what I can make happen. Instead of just being lovable as I am, which is how the Lord sees me. And, he's shown me that so many times in prayer when I've actually found out like, what's the desire underneath that? Yeah.
So then you ended up discerning,
Oh,
become
yes.
married, right? And that's just kind of like once you left the TV show, you would realize that you had a like call to marriage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's even kind of a little another side story there. I thought that I was called to one of the orders on the television show, actually. I was going to enter with the Daughters of St. Mary of Providence in Chicago.
Okay.
And I was very excited about that. I'd given the Lord my heart. He gave me his heart. I thought that was my call to religious life. And so I was like, okay, where's my order? Where is it? And I was excited to enter with the daughters. And then the TV show finished filming. And what they told us was, please don't reveal your decision to anybody, friends, family, anybody. Well, family, you kind of maybe have to, but like, don't wrap up your affairs and go to the convent for a couple months. That was part of our agreement.
Okay.
And that time actually ended up being really good time because I finished up the show. I went back to New York, and I was just living quietly. And this little worm of discontent started coming right back again and being like, you don't want to be a nun. And this dread came back. And I was like, why do I feel this dread? I'm so excited to join this order. You study in Rome for a year. I was like, that sounds like such a dream. A good friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine who was with me on the show was entering with them. And I was like, we can enter together. Also, the Lord gave me his heart. So yeah, that's my call. And I thought I finally had a direction. And then this worm of discontent comes back. And the Lord was taking me down a new path again. And he always does that more times than we want, right? Like,
yeah.
Yes, but it's so good for us. It's so good. And that surrender and knowing the Lord's voice, like just deepening that relationship with him, that was the best preparation for marriage that I could have ever had. So I wrestled for months back and forth in this sort of quiet time. I was continuing talking to the vocation director and my spiritual director, and I was very confused. But finally, I got to the point where at this point, I'd given God about a year of my life in discerning my vocation. And I really wanted to be married, but I still had this tentative commitment to go to Chicago and join the convent there. And I finally said to the Lord, okay, I'm going to give you one more month of just not doing anything about anything. I'm going to go to Mass every day. I'm going to do a holy hour every day. I was living in this retreat center, which allowed me to like have my choice of chapels and masses, which was like such amazing. It was like Catholic Disneyland. It was so great. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to stay close to you. I'm going to spend lots of time in prayer. But if at the end of this month, I still want to be married as much as I do now, then I'm going to say no to the sisters, and I'm going to be open to dating. And by the end of that month, I wanted more, like my whole desire was to be married and to have children. And so then I felt very confident going forward because the Lord hadn't given me the go ahead, like a sign. He hadn't given me a voice saying, this is what I want you to do or anything like that. But I had spent so much time working my way through the layers of desire. And I knew in my heart of hearts, I had surrendered to him and I'd given him, I'd also taken action, right? I'd gone to visit lots of convents and I'd taken a lot of time. And so I felt very confident going into dating. And I think, just anecdotally, I think that's the case more often than not. Like you said, like we've touched on several times, we want that certainty, right? Yeah. But I think the Lord, it reveals part of the relationship that the Lord wants with us. He doesn't want us to be his servants. He wants us to be his children.
I love that.
And what if my son came to me and he's like, Mom, what do you want me to be when I grow up? And if I'm there and I'm like, well, I want you to be a lawyer and I want you to go to this school and I want you to get this degree, whatever, this is your path. Like what kind of parent would love their child that way? That would not be the loving thing to do, right? And God loves us like a parent. So if if my son comes to me and he goes, what do you think I should be when I grow up? And what am I going to say to him? I'm going to say, well, let's look at your talents. Let's look at the things that you're good at, the strengths that you have. I want you to use those. I really want you to be happy. Like, what do you like doing? And that's how the Lord parents us. He's like, well, what do you like? Like, what have you tried? What gives you joy? And then at the end of the day, I want my son to make the choice because I don't want him coming to me once he becomes a lawyer and being like, Mom, you told me the plan and you never let me step outside of it. And now I'm miserable and it's on you. And the Lord wants us to choose in freedom because our vocation is going to be hard. It is going to challenge us at different moments. And so, if I had not chosen it myself and God had just directed me like a little pawn, then I would be feeling very resentful about now because, having 4 kids and being pregnant with the 5th is very challenging.
Yeah.
But I know that I chose this in partnership with the Lord and that this really was my desire. And there's parts of it for sure that I couldn't have foreseen. But that freedom is like, that's the greatest gift, and that's the Lord's gift to us as his children.
It also helps you to like take ownership, like you said. Like if someone just like forces you to do something, you're going to be a lot more resentful than when you like make that choice like in accord with God, but it's a choice that you made.
Yes. And the Lord trusts us more than we want to trust ourselves, right? God's like, he's like, I've planted the desires in your heart. They're there. Let the seeds grow. Let it take time. And we're like, but why can't you just tell me now? So I can have the security of knowing. Exactly. But again, coming back to, and I've said this a few times already now, sorry, I jiggled the table. This is why the title of my book is Adventure Awaits. The Lord is an adventurer. He wants to lead you one winding bend in the road at a time, one little crest of the hill at a time. And along the way, and that's really how it has to be, not like because he's trying to hide things from you, but just because you need to absorb all of the lessons in each season as you go without jumping to the next thing, because you couldn't possibly learn those lessons faster. I think about the intervening time when I decided I wanted to be married. And then when I actually met my husband, it was like, gosh, it was only about 6 months.
Okay.
That's not a long time, but it felt like 15 years.
Like I figured out what I'm going to do. Yes. Where is it?
Where's the guy? I joined Catholic Match. I was like looking around on my friend group. I was probably like really, really hard to be around. I was a mess at that point because I was like, okay, where's the guy? And that was my whole focus. And I look back at that time now and it felt like forever. Like I was living at this retreat center. I had a really good group of friends in New York City. And I would go hang out with them on the weekends. But the whole time I felt like I had this unfulfilled desire, this hole in my heart where I really wanted to be married. And that's actually, that not only was that good, that was necessary. It was completely, utterly necessary for me because if I had not had that loneliness, I could have just gone on entertaining myself forever. Like New York City is just, I could have gone to 3 events per night, I could have just party hopped and done whatever I wanted. If I hadn't had that loneliness, like been at those parties and been lonely in the midst of them, I wouldn't have been ready to be married. As then when I got married, I immediately conceived a baby. And so now, I'm nauseous in the evenings and then the baby's born and baby's bedtime is 7:00. I'm not going out to parties. Was that a hard transition? Yes, that was a hard transition. But it was so much less hard knowing that I had chosen it, that this is what I really wanted, that if I went back to those parties, the fun isn't really there. The answer isn't really there. This new stage of life is hard, but that time of loneliness got me ready for it. Yeah.
It's interesting because you're saying that just makes me think of like Lent and then the Easter season of like how you need that like season of preparation for the celebration.
Yes.
And I don't know why, how exactly that ties in, but that's just like the first thing that came to mind while you were saying it. So,
totally. I think anytime you take on a cross in Lent, like it feels like it's the heaviest cross ever, right? Like I find every Friday, I'm like, dude, I cannot live without a burger.
The rest of the year when you can do it and do another sacrifice, you're fine. Yes. But as soon as Lent comes around.
Thursday and Saturday, I don't want burgers, but Fridays, like this is all I need. And it's amazing.
We can't have.
Exactly. Well, and that's how the devil can prey on us too, is like the cross in your current season feels like it needs to go away. Like there's this like necessity of like, I need to be done with this cross. When is it going to end? Yeah. But the temptation can become to think of our crosses as like if I could just get rid of this cross, then I would be happy. Yeah. And then we start living for the future, which is never a good thing. And I've definitely fallen prey to that many times. But if we're not carrying our cross well in this current season, then we miss the joy too, right? Yeah.
And it probably does make it harder down the road too. Like if you're in a season of singleness and it's a cross, then I'm sure that like if you're not learning how to carry it well, then when you do get married, and you have another cross, it's like, oh shoot, I could have practiced this before and shown up better now, which I have definitely like found myself struggling with. But
100%.
I look back and I'm like, I could have done that so much better than I did. But
yes. Oh, yeah. I did not appreciate what a joy it is when you want to go somewhere to just like get yourself ready, pick up your purse, your cute little purse, and just go. Now it's like diaper bags, snacks. Have we all had a nap? Have we all do we have all of our socks and shoes packed? It's like an hour and a half to get out the door. Now I had no idea. Like I just didn't appreciate my freedom, in the time that I had. When I say freedom, I say, it's not like having kids is a prison, but there's a lot of responsibility for sure.
Yeah.
So I just didn't appreciate that. Or even just being able to have to sleep in. You don't sleep in as a parent of young children. Like you just don't get that luxury ever.
Yeah.
The kids wake up on their schedule and they dictate your sleep schedule. So I definitely didn't appreciate that either. Or being able to go out to coffee dates with friends and just sit as long as I wanted. Or have a day where I didn't have to do anything. Whew, that's something different from life now. But yeah, At the same time too, though, I am very glad to be where I am, because if I were to go back, the appreciation wouldn't be there, because I only see it in retrospect.
Yeah. And
which
also
is true for all of us.
Again, God gives you what you need at those points. Like that might have been what you needed then, and fulfilling and been really nice to have those things at that point. But then if you were to transplant yourself back into that, I feel like you'd be very lonely without your family. So
100%.
Yeah.
I need a couple days away. And then I'm like, oh, my children. Yeah. By the end of a couple days, if my husband and I are ever so fortunate as to get a day away together, which is very rare, we spend the first half of it being like, where are the kids? It's too quiet. And then by the second half of the day, we're like, oh, this is so great. And then we're like, we're not ready to go back. But then coming back is really beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
What are 3 takeaways you hope our audience takes away from this conversation for when it coming for discernment?
Oh, gosh. Okay. 3 takeaways. Look for the Lord's voice in your life.
Okay.
There's more in my book that we haven't gotten to touch on because we only had hour and a half. Look for the Lord's voice in your life, whether that's in scripture, whether that's in sending you very personalized love notes. Ask him for things so that he can actually answer those prayers. So look for the Lord working in your life and get to know your story. How is God working in your story? When you start to look for it intentionally, your life will start to change. You'll start to actually see that. And then you'll be able to discern his voice, and you'll be able to actually know who he is. Second of all, as far as discernment goes, pray for the grace to surrender. And I give away a prayer of surrender on my website for anyone. If you just, it's not, you don't have to pay anything, but if you go to my website, which is staceysumereau.com, and then you just put in your email address, you'll get an email immediately. And inside of that email is a free discernment packet. And inside of that packet is the prayer of surrender that we've talked about several times.
That's so funny because we just started doing that with the Surrender Novena on our website as well.
Oh, Surrender Novena is so great.
Do you know what my hack is for it?
No, what?
The first 9 days of each month.
I love that.
It was something I saw someone on Instagram. They were doing it one year, and I was like, I love that. Because it's if you do it every day, then it loses its flavor after a while.
Yeah.
It can feel that way. But if you but I didn't want to just do it at the beginning of each year because that's too spread out. And so I was like, oh, it's so easy to remember what day you're on because it's what day of the month is it?
Perfect. Perfect. Well, then first 9 days of the month, you go to Surrender Novena, and then the rest of the time you can go to my Surrender Prayer, which is different than the Surrender Novena. Okay. So it kind of reads like a litany, where you say, you surrender each part of yourself to God. Surrender my heart, my mind, my memory, my imagination, my weaknesses, my desires, my sins, my past, my present, my future, and whatever it is. And I pray it very slowly, way slower than what I just said. But what it reveals is what you're holding back from the Lord. Because it's so easy to say, I give you everything. I give you the things I don't want, right? That's easy to surrender. But there would always be 3 or 4 or 5 things where I'm like, oh, I don't want to give that to you. I want to keep that. So really pay attention to where's that tug in your heart as you pray.
Yeah.
So pray that prayer of surrender and pray for the grace to mean it. For me, it took about 6 weeks of praying that prayer every day before I actually could pray it with my whole heart and say, no, this is precious to me. I want to keep this, but I'm choosing to give it to you because I trust that you're going to do something great with it. And then the third thing, let's see, the third thing. Make a colloquy, which is what St. Ignatius, that's his fancy term for just a conversation with God. So go ahead and imagine crucified, not standing, but crucified in front of you. And what do you want to say to him? Ask yourself, what am I doing for Christ? What have I done for Christ? And what should I do for Christ? And just have a conversation. St. Ignatius says, as a friend to a friend, which, like, if my friend was crucified, would I be talking about the most shallow things in my life? Probably not. How you doing today? Probably not like that, but really bringing him what's on your heart, knowing that he's dying for love of you. So those are my three action items. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on. And then where can our audience find you? You just said your website, but
sure.
StaceySumereau.com.
StaceySumereau.com. Okay. So my last name is tricky. It's French. You can blame my husband. It's Sumereau. Okay. So if it's easier, I can definitely send you a link.
I think I can put it in the description as well.
Perfect.
I looked you up on your website originally. So
great. That's beautiful. And I can also send you a link to purchase my book if anyone would like to. Pre-orders are happening now, and pre-orders are like an extra special bonus because it signals to the fancy book algorithms that, like, people want this book, people like this book.
Nice.
But by the time this episode releases, the book might actually be out.
Let me know when it comes out, and I'll either put the link to where to get it or the link to where you can pre-order it in the description as well.
Beautiful. They're both the same link. So
are you on
either pre-order
social
or
media?
I am. Yes. Okay. Stacey Sumereau again for Instagram and Facebook. Instagram and Facebook are the only two, to be honest with you. But you can reach me on both of those.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you
for coming on. This has been a great conversation.
Yes. This has been so wonderful. Thank you for you are a good interviewer. You have, I know we talked about you had to grow into this role, but you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And to all of our listeners, definitely go check out Stacey's website and her social media and get her book. And I'll put a free ebook on our end screen as well for you to check out, and keep on living the culture of life. God bless.